Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Today, we take a look at the state of global bloodstock with seven-figure results here and abroad this week. What does it mean? We chat to Harry Bailey at Inglis about Inglis's latest collaboration. We look at the distribution of Godolphin horses and reflect on Tim's trip to Newmarket and Goodwood. We then have a special segment with two experts in their fields, bloodstock agent Dave Mee and former analyst Aaron Gooden, about what they look for in a horse. And in wagering, are we forgetting the punter? Tim, welcome back. Globetrotting senior journalist has decided to avail himself to us this week, which is fantastic. It's been a big couple of weeks for you, Tim. I guess it's a good time, given you have been travelling a little bit, to sort of reflect on the international strength of bloodstock at the moment. We saw some incredible results of Fasig-Tipton yesterday. The strength of that Northern Hemisphere market's quite significant and has a strong knock-on effect down here, doesn't it?
It's, having been up north for 6 or 7 days, seeing those big, uber wealthy players, Wathman, Ammo Racing, Kia and so forth, literally rubbed shoulders with him. He brushed me, I think, but that's okay. There is a lot of money at the top end of the market, as we saw at Saratoga this week. It's, over 100 million for sale that described to me as a bit like the top end of Magic Millions and Easter. It's, select 200 odd horses. Inland in next month will probably provide a greater view of the overall health of the US market and Northern Hemisphere. But, at the top end, the $25 million lots is, those uber wealthy investors are, in the luxury item of what owning a racehorse is. They're, huge demand at the moment. They want to get involved.
Yeah, and I'll put my hand up here. I've been a bit of a cynic of the concept of the Netflix effect and the impact of like what the Netflix series Drive to Survive had on Formula One and how it transformed that to become a really popular product. Really interested to read in your article yesterday, Tim, about a Swiss investor that had seen the Kentucky Derby series. Now, I mean, you and I both watched that series. Once we sort of got over the fact that it probably wasn't aimed at us, it was probably aimed at a more, I'm not going to say we're not aspirational, but maybe a more sort of, less exposed audience around that stuff. The characters and the way that it was portrayed and put forward, you have to be on those formats in order to appeal to people. And to be perfectly honest, if you're going to get 2 or 3 investors sticking their hands in their pockets for a few $1 million each, it makes it worthwhile for racing to continue to operate in this space, doesn't it?
And that Swiss investor, he does own standard breds or harness horses in the States, so he's not completely foreign, but, triggered him to get, there was plenty of egos in that Netflix series, and people want to get involved, and it's the same, racing takes all personalities, can get involved, and if you've got the money and at that top end, it is an ego thing most of the time, and it's not about trying to get a return on the track necessarily. Yes, there's an element to that, but it's the thrill of the chase of trying to get a very good horse and competing at the elite races, whether it's Kentucky Derbies, Goodwoods, Royal Ascots, and, Randwick and Flemington during the spring and autumn.
Yeah, it's interesting, wasn't it? I think the other thing too is he sought out Kenny McPeak who was in that series to train his horses because he loved what he saw. And that's the advantages for trainers of featuring these types of things, that people sit there and go, oh, I'd love to have a horse with that person, and that's what it means. And you've probably seen that firsthand, the last couple of weeks, of the value of having that, understanding of who these trainers are. Well, of course, the bloodstock boom certainly happening not just overseas, but in Australia at the moment. We saw $2.6 million for Alentia at the Magic Millions virtual sale this week. Another remarkable result for Denise Martin and Star Thoroughbreds. They've got an amazing record for turning these fillies into valuable, successful fillies on the track through Chris Waller, and then transferring that to value in the sales ring back to their clients. And it's an amazing model, but she's not a Group 1 winning. Group 1 placed mare, $2.6 million, lovely looking mare, but it does show you that the demand for those quality mares is as strong as ever, as we saw during the recent broodmare sales a couple of months back. But how do you feel like that translates to the Australian market, Tim, in terms of the yearling market coming forward? The stuff that's going on overseas with the demand over here, the strength of the Australian broodmare market. Probably fair to say that the Australian yearling market's been reasonable, but not barn burning over the last couple of years. Do you feel like there's a real sort of return to strength and confidence now, and especially in that top end, to continue to drive that growth?
Well, just on Alentia, Denise Martin, and more recently with Brett Howard helping her select. The fact that she's been able to sell so many high-priced mares, yes, they've got the records, but really good-looking stock. They obviously, buy the type a lot, and that translates into the sales when they go to sell them. And it's credits to Denise and Brett being able to foresee how a yearling's going to grow out. And with Alentia, very good horse, but not a Group 1 placed, but not Group 1 winner. I think it's significant that Lothman Racing, led by Ollie Tate from Twin Hills Stud, that, they were everywhere at Goodwood last week. And to come down and buy a Group 2 winner, they underbid Zugotcha. I believe they bid on a mare at Chairman's, and they're going to take her back to the Northern Hemisphere. It says a lot about the value of the Australian bloodstock industry and the value of the mares that they can, they're investing down here. And I think that will flow on at the middle to the top end. I think that'll flow on next year at the yearling sales, particularly given the value of the Australian dollar being quite low. And, the pound's, double the Australian dollar, which I found out pretty quickly last week. So, and same with the US dollar, the Australian bloodstock's quite good value. And, the Resolute Racing's, John Stewart's, I think they'll be all coming down and playing, but you're going to have to have the right stock, It's those days of the COVID explosion where people were just buying anything almost. I think those days are over. You've got to have quality.
And joining us now is Harry Barley, bloodstock sales manager at Inglis. Harry, you've been back in the UK. What's the view of the global bloodstock market at the moment from over there? There's obviously a great sort of strength in international confidence sort of permeating throughout the world at the moment when it comes to buying and selling horses.
Hi, Bren. Yeah, no, it's. I would say globally at the moment, there's a huge amount of interest. Maybe obviously seeing off the back of the results in America, but in Europe at the moment, Tassels have just released their October yearling sale catalogue. Obviously, last year it was a record sale. I mean, it was a sale which probably, from a record perspective, would be very, very hard to beat. I mean, obviously, it's dominated at the top end by a few major players, and those players have a huge impact on how the sales season coming up will perform. But I mean, as we've seen, there's some great new entities like the likes of Wathnan. Obviously, you got the established partners like Coolmore, Ammo Racing, to name a few. So it's very exciting up there. I mean, the racing's very competitive. And yeah, I mean, I'd say they're very, very excited and very hopeful for a very good season ahead.
Harry, talk us about the collaboration with Tattersall's. Inglis and Tattersall's, I think, Tattersall's the shareholder in Inglis, and you've got a pop-up sale, 2 lots I'll be going through today, I think. We see more of this, do you think? And what's the interest been like?
Well, Tim, we did a joint collaboration sale back in December for mares in foal on Southern Hemisphere pregnancies, and the sale went very well. Actually, from Tattersall's perspective, it was the highest grossing sale online they've ever had. So from that perspective, it was very positive. And obviously, we've now moved on to a sale here where we've got a filly and a tried horse. It's not a market we're going to be doing a huge amount of, but from my perspective and from Inglis's perspective, obviously, I spend a bit of time up there over the winter. Tattersall's have been really helpful in introducing me to prospective clients who we feel could be targets to come down to Australia, to come and shop down here, to get involved. And we saw at Easter last year, Chairman's this year and Easter this year, there's a huge amount of European interest, relatively speaking, compared to previous years. And we feel that's an area which can grow a little bit. So Tassel has been great introducing these people, and we just feel doing 1 or 2 collaborations a year like this is a great way to get our name up there a bit more, and also to meet more clients as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Harry. I mean, I guess the other aspect of this is introducing some Australian buyers into the European market to a certain extent too, because you're fair to say that the Australian buyer as a rule is much more comfortable in that digital space. I mean, it's a much more evolved and, I guess, mature market down here, given particularly you guys have led the way in developing that digital market.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's still, as you say, still in its early stages up in Europe and in America, relatively speaking. And, I think, as you rightly say, Australian buyers have a huge amount of confidence in buying online. As you see on the platform, the Tattersall's online platform, the information provided now is very, very good. You've got good quality videos, photos. The horses are fully vetted. There's good description. I went and saw them. So from a buyer's perspective, we've kind of got every base covered. If they have any queries, they just get in touch with us, or they use an agent on the ground, which I know some buyers based down here have already done for this sale. So yeah, it's certainly an area which was certainly growing more in Europe and America, but obviously they've got a long way to catch up with what's happening down here.
It seems to be like there's obviously the frequency of your digital sales have been that sort of fortnightly level for Inglis for a fair while now, but the quality and I guess volume of horses sold through the sale continues to sort of go throughout the year. I think we've spoken about this before, but it's not quite time of year, but this time of year in particular, ahead of the Australian breeding season, seems to be very busy and a lot of sort of high quality offerings that are sort of trying to get to market to get that, I guess, that last minute breeding stock sort of in before the season starts.
Absolutely. I mean, Velocious last week was a phenomenal result for Go Racing. Yearling bought her for 1.625, and there was strong interest in her. I mean, that was a really, really good result. And, we've seen the last couple of online sales, as you mentioned, good quality young mares with either early pregnancies or mares off the track have sold really, really well. And we expect that to continue as we get towards the breeding season. Obviously, there's new stallions out there, and for those shareholders or people with breeding rights, they need to fill those with good quality mares. And we've certainly got some really exciting mares coming up in this week's sale. But obviously we've got the English Digital Tats Online collaboration to get through first. And, the bountiful filly by Zoostar, she's a really appealing filly for the Southern Hemisphere. Obviously Zoostar is doing a phenomenal job. She's a 2-time winning 2-year-old, nearly got Group 2 place as a 2-year-old. And with stakes place as a 3-year-old, you can race her on for another year or put her in foal this year. I mean, you've got plenty of options.
Yeah. And I guess the key is to offer in those markets, whether a small sort of bespoke sale like you've got with that or broad, it's the bigger digital sales that you need to have these offerings, these different offerings, don't you? Which is an example, even in a 2-lot sale, you need to have sort of different ends of the market, a horse that can probably continue racing on and moving on and a more of a breeding prospect.
Definitely. I mean, if you look at the 3-year-old gelding, Many Men, he, in my eyes, he looks like a potential Cups horse down the track. Sydney Cups horse, maybe developing into Melbourne Cups horse in time. He was very impressive at Ascot last start, won really, really well. Showed a really good turn of foot, which I think is important for the Australian market. And, if you look at his start, I think it was 3 starts ago at York, that form has worked out extremely well. The winner was Merchant, who subsequently won a Group 2 race at Glorious Goodwood last week and is one of the leading fancies for the St. Leger. And then in second, the horse was then placed at Royal Ascot in a Group 2 race. So, the form is rock solid. You can ignore his second last start. He didn't like the wet track. To me, he's a perfect tailor-made horse for Australia.
Harry, thanks so much for your time and all the best for the sales over the next couple of weeks.
Thanks very much, gentlemen.
On to racing now, Tim, and you spent close to a week in Newmarket and Goodwood, as we mentioned, over the past week or so. And obviously, there's a bloodstock aspect of that and getting an understanding of that. That's obviously something you're strongly interested in. But from a racing perspective, what did you glean from your time? Obviously, spent a bit of fair time with Henry Dwyer looking, what was going on with the Eustace brothers. I know you had a good catch up with both Harry and David Eustace across that time and got to sort of chat to them about how things are moving for them. But what did you glean from what goes on in the UK compared to what you'd see at Wagga on a cold Thursday morning?
Well, just I've seen photos and you hear about Newmarket. Just the it's hard to get your head around just how the sheer scale of Newmarket and the training, it's basically surrounds the whole, it is the town, facilities everywhere, horses have right of way over traffic. And one end is the July, the course or Newmarket race course as we entered. And then the other end is, the Warren Hills and, further out to Godolphin's private facilities and just the sheer scale. I know there was fleeting, Peter Volandes, I think a few years ago suggested maybe Racing New South Wales would, buy some land around the New South Wales Southern Highlands, but I just don't think it can be replicated even on a smaller model. Just the staffing that, as Henry Dwyer alluded to last week on the podcast, but just the value of the land there, you just couldn't, I don't think you could justify it. It'd be too the investment, but
well, that land's been there for 250 years, Tim. That's the thing. Like, you've missed your window a little bit. You're not going to go and, to be able to buy a chunk of land out of the Southern Highlands is going to cost you an absolute fortune. So it's hard to see how that could actually play out, isn't it? So,
and there's so much history, but the Harry Eustace has really had a great season. Winners at Royal Ascot, Goodwood, really starting on the march. He's leasing stables from Godolphin. He's a good up and coming trainer. I think he's got a couple of Aussie owners after last week, and then going to William Haggis. Yes, there's some trainers that just keep training the way their father and grandfather and great grandfather did, but he's quite an adopter of new technology. There's salt rooms and horse spas and all different things that I guess probably even Kieran Maher here with some of the facilities is invested in, and Lloyd Williams at Macedon Lodge, and sort of a mix of the old and the new. And there's something great about Newmarket just to experience it and see it. I think any racing lover, I guess, should get there at some point just to witness 50 horses working at a time, which you just don't see here.
There's probably something to be said. If you treat horses like stars, they'll perform like stars. And if you treat them like sausages, they'll perform like sausages. So, probably a little bit of a message there to ensure that the animal is a big part of that. Yeah, and I guess on that basis, and what is really interesting in Australia, the big change that's happened this year, the biggest change we've seen probably in 5 or 6 years in terms of stable setups, is Godolphin's private training model. We saw Chris Waller become the first of the new trainers to get a winner for Godolphin. Anthony and Sam Freedman have already had success. They were always obviously previously trainers with Godolphin, but in that new, public training model that Godolphin's moved towards in Australia. It's interesting to see the horses that have sort of been spread around so far. There's obviously a new bunch of 2-year-olds, which we haven't got confirmation on yet, but there's an article on the Straight this week, which I penned on Run the Numbers, about where the Godolphin horses are going. And obviously Sam and Anthony Freedman are well positioned because they've already got a relationship there. And already had a few horses there, but you look at the fact that Lindsay Park, Kieran Maher and Chris Waller, all part of this sort of, Godolphin move towards private training. Public training, sorry.
Yeah, it's probably not a great surprise that Anthony and Sam got the most because they were already training a handful, as you touched on. I think the most interesting thing will be where the 2-year-olds go, who gets what and how many, and, pretty much all those, or most of those trainers are proven 2-year-old trainers. Probably Joe Pride's a bit more conservative, but doesn't say if he was given the right stock, I'm sure he can train a 2-year-old. So that'd be quite interesting if they do give him a few young horses to see, what Joe could do with the, given the pedigrees and the opportunity. So, the next 12 months is going to be quite interesting. And as Andy McAfee said previously, doesn't preclude other trainers getting horses in the future. So I guess success will, if you have success with those horses, you'll keep getting more of them.
Yeah, and I think if you look at those horses, the distribution, a lot of them are 3-year-olds this year. So we're probably going to see some immediate success and immediate improvement, which is what Chris Waller's already found. And I think Kieran Maher will find as well that we'll get some good 3-year-olds to sort of bring through along the way. The following message is brought to you by Darley. Let's talk about what makes a stallion stand out. First, the pedigree by a champion sire out of a Group 3 winning Street Cry mare. And that Danehill Street Cry cross that's produced the likes of Farnan and Animo. Now the performance. Silver Slipper winner, Tottenham winner, runner-up in the Golden Slipper. But here's the clincher. He trained on, came back at 3, won the Vane, and then won the Newmarket. When you put it all together, it's hard to argue. Cylinder, standing at Darley. And joining us on Straight Talk are 2 men who come from different parts of the industry, but do share a common skill set. Dave Mee operates Pinhook Bloodstock International as a renowned bloodstock agent and a member of the FBAA. Aaron Gooden is a professional form analyst who operates the Good Oil, a form and mounting yard service focused on Victorian racing. What could these 2 men have in common? Well, both are focused on examining the physical characteristics of thoroughbreds, and so we thought we'd bring them together here on Straight Talk. Gents, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be on, Bren.
Good to be here, Brendan.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess let's bring this together, the most, relevant thing for now. What brings you guys together? It's a bit of a serendipity, I suppose, but recent Group 3 Aurie Star Stakes winner, King of Roseau. It's good to take a specific example when we're talking about these things. Dave, you were the man that were on the spot when the horse was purchased for $95,000 for a yearling by Pulse Racing. Aaron rated King of Roseau as the clear best bet on Saturday and was even more confident after assessing him through the mounting yard. Dave, we'll start off with you. Well, you go first. When you first saw this Son of Capitalist at Magic Millions a couple of years back, what stood out physically about him, and what sort of boxes did he tick for you when you're assessing your yearling to know that he's a horse that'll fit in your wheelhouse?
Well, there was a couple of things. I mean, a lot of it was body language. He he did have a presence about him, and I think at the time I sent out as you do after purchasing him, that a bit of an overtop tweet that he was a horse to go to war on, because he had a real self-confidence about him, and not all horses have that, but I know the Capitalist breed well. I've seen a lot of Capitalists, and this horse, he was a very, very good version of what Capitalist is capable of leading, and that's length, strength, natural muscle. He used himself well. I'm very, very big on that. And he did have a very good temperament. As I say, he was just a very self-assured sort of a horse. And then, the reality is he had a few little x-ray niggles and that we were aware of, but we weighed it up and it was, the benefits outweighed the negatives. And obviously it was, I don't make a decision on the budget, but he was right in the wheelhouse for the Chris and Cameron and Michael Hulse racing thoroughbreds.
Yeah, and you kept an eye on him as he developed through. Has he developed the way you thought he would in the type of horse that he would over time?
Well, after Saturday's race, he's certainly developed in a way we'd hoped, So,
yeah.
But when you're looking at these horses, you certainly are trying to forecast what they're going to look like in a year, 2 years' time. And he's a gangly teenager that's turned into a man. Like he's just a really good looking horse. He's composed and he's power in all the right places. And he's one of those horses that you just love looking at. Like he's a really, really good style of an athlete, thankfully.
Aaron, you'd obviously, Peter Snowden's had the horse flying. He's been gelded and really found form in Sydney. So you obviously identified him on form. But when you saw him in the mounting yard, what were you looking for? What did you want to see to confirm that, yes, this horse has travelled down well, he's ready to produce probably a peak performance?
I suppose that's probably the important part, is the confirmation. I don't really use the yard to find the bets. I do use it as a confirmation tool. With a horse like that, it's slightly different, King of Roseau, because I think from memory I've only seen it once. So I haven't built a profile on how this horse is going to parade. So I'm almost going back to basics with this one. Is exactly right. Like, how has it travelled down? It's had a number of starts since it's been gelded, so I don't want to see it over the top. Still want to see some good condition there. But the attitude as well that it's come down in, the walk, obviously. But Dave spoke about its sort of presence in the yard. I don't think it helped having sheet answers and splashback outside of it in the parade there. It just really stood out. It was a bit of a beast relative to those. But it's sort of, how has it travelled down, the attitude? It was always going to be at peak fitness. So I'm just looking to sort of tick boxes from a basic sense that I don't have a profile on how this horse parades typically. So I just could draw it back to basics. So it's a little bit different with that runner to how I'd ordinarily go about the yard.
So, but then, once you tick those boxes, had you already bet, or do you bet again, or how do you play those sort of things?
No, we'd already max bet it, so you can't go past that. But if I hadn't, absolutely I would have, because there was two other real dangers in the race, right? It was Splashback and Marble 9. And that's another thing where you can tie it in relative to the other runners. I had a bit of a sense that I think Marble 9 was probably over the top based on what it did the last start, and it's sort of eventuated that way. And then Splashback, it had that little gap between, was it really pumped up to win on Saturday? I don't think so. So you just had ticks in King of Roseau's favour from the limited exposure I've had with the horse, and then little knocks with the others. So if we hadn't maxed it, you'd definitely go again based off that factor for sure.
On his composure, we're friends with Dave, and so I've followed this horse from the get-go. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but he might have been a little bit hot early days. So that composure, I would think would have been really important. And I assume he has been the last few weeks or last few starts the way he's been racing.
Well, he's just matured, and a lot of horses are like that. It's like human, they're all different. They're just, they used to be, been to the track 16, 17 times, so he's just matured mentally. So I think he's always been really quite sensible. Some people are of the opinion that Capitalist can be a little bit, not the easiest horses to handle temperament-wise, but he's always been quite good. And he's just, as I say, he's just matured.
Aaron, I've sort of got to know in the last few months, you examine, what I find interesting about you is there's not just a lot of okay, mounting yard, confirming where they're at physically, all that type of stuff, but you also look at how a horse physically gets through a race and how it handles itself during a race. And often some of your commentary post-race is fascinating about, a horse might get beaten because it, didn't apply itself at certain points, or, found certain parts of the track difficult or whatever else. What are you looking to learn there? Like, if you look at a performance like King of Roseau on Saturday, it wins and everybody jumps up and down. But I chatted to you Saturday night and you said, geez, it could have won by 4 or 5, but about the clock tower, it sort of started to wobble about a bit or whatever else. I mean, those are probably the key aspects. And not just sitting there going, it's not just a horse winning, but it's what it's done during the race, which will give you a better indication of how a horse like that's going to go going forward.
Yeah, I think reviewing the race is probably more important than doing the form on the race going in. No, that's, for me, yeah. I guess sort of what you're trying to get a sense of is what's your rated price, what was the market price, sort of blend those together. If you've got this sort of a finishing matrix on, the expected finishing position relative to the winner, has it over or underperformed, but has it over or underperformed relative to what you've seen in the yard and sort of building the profile of that horse? I think that's sort of what you're trying to take out is sort of what's it done relative to what you're expecting, but also given the tempo of the race, where has it hit its top speed, and then what's it done sectionally from there relative to the meeting, relative to other runners, the lanes, all this sort of stuff. And then you dial it back and say, okay, could this horse have handled a more genuine tempo? Is it better suited to a slower tempo? If it's, King of Roseau is a bit of it's a turn of foot horse, right? But I think it could have handled a stronger tempo in front and exposed them a lot more. There's a little sort of 8-4 slacking in that race, and you really notice it's quite soft on it late. And I thought the best part of its race was the last 200 metres. And then watch what it does past the post. For me, that really says I don't think the horse maxed out its potential rating in that race. Whereas a few others I think sort of did relative to their sort of finishing splits and finishing closing speed. So that's something I'm looking to take out is, has the horse actually got the max rating out of itself?
Dave, what similarities, having listened to Aaron now, is there many similarities between what you're looking for as a young horse, whether it be a weanling, yearling, 2-year-olds, or even, tried horses, to what you're seeing and what Aaron's looking at in the yard and, on race day and trying to find bets?
Tricky little question there, boys. Well, purely from a physical assessment point of view, I mean, a lot of it depends on the, and the horses I buy, it depends on the orders that I've got at the time, and the budget that it is. But, for example, I mean, I look for different types of things in, say, an order, and for Aaron's case, like a 2-year-old race, as opposed, if I've got an order for a 2-year-old, early developing 2-year-old type, I'm looking for different things as opposed to, if I've got an order for a 3-year-old classic sort of staying type. I mean, early developing horses, I mean, they're fast twitch muscles. They can be a little bit more on their toes, whereas a stay, you like to have a little bit more laid back attitude. And temperament's always a big thing, but, for a stay, you like them real laid back. So, I mean, as to similarities, for Aaron, I guess it depends on the actual race being run at the time. I mean, using the Aurie Star as an example, I mean, Aaron's touched on it before. I mean, from an observer looking on the TV, I mean, in some ways it was a mid-season grand final for King of Roseau. So he was tight, he was fit, he paraded enormous. So as opposed to the, the favourite Splashback, I mean, a lot of that was the pedigree. I mean, I know that stallion, it's a French stallion, she's by Le Havre, and they're generally, they're sort of slower twitch sort of animals where they look like milers. They develop later in their career. I know she's got a bit of age on her, but she didn't look like a sprinter. I mean, when you weigh it up against King of Roseau, she'd won at 1,200 metres, but not at this level. So, I mean, there are similarities, I guess, but it's easy to say now, I would say, but different things. Yeah.
You touched on it, Dave, but, Bren and I have gone to a lot of horse sales, and you talk to the buyers, particularly the big colts groups. Temperament seems to almost not trump everything, but it's such a key factor. Is that, and I assume it would transfer to, if a young horse as well, particularly those colts targeting 2-year-old races. They've got to be able to handle the atmosphere and the crowd and everything to produce their best.
100%. Temperament is really, really important. But, a slow horse can have a great temperament, but still be really slow. So, to my mind, temperament's important, but you've still got to have the physical attributes to give it a good chance or a high probability of being successful on the track. So, I mean, you sort of take it back from the track a little bit. I mean, I bought nice weanlings to pinhookers, yearlings, and, I've often overlooked the temperament, and it's, unfortunately, when it comes to selling them as yearlings, they fall in a heap or they misbehave badly, and it affects your resale price, and it's the same in the mounting yard. So, horse's temperament, it might not be a bad horse. I mean, it might not be, angry or ill-tempered. It's often a mental immaturity. They lack self-confidence. So, you need a delicate hand to kind of bring the best out of them. And that's where good stud managers and in turn good trainers come about. So, I mean, of course, temperament can be changed, obviously, with colts. You can make the ultimate gear change, and the best exhibit A of that's obviously King of Roseau. He, just with natural development, I mean, the geldings just settled them down, focused them. It's kept the weight off them to keep them more sound. So, you can change the temperament a little bit that way. With fillies, you can use medications like Regulate to, temper a temperamental filly. But, each state's different. I mean, I don't know why, but if I'm correct, I don't think Racing Victoria actually allow Regulate for horses. So that's a bit of a head scratcher. But I mean, horses are like people. I mean, they're all different and with different personalities, and generally their temperaments are the same from day dot until they're old, older horses. But, it's up to the people entrusted with caring for these horses in terms of stud managers, yearling managers and trainers to sort of harness it the right way. But temperament, in short, is really important.
Aaron, sort of what we're sort of getting into the crux of here is, I guess, transferable skills or the ability for what Dave does and what you do. There are similarities, but there are obviously key differences because you're assessing horses at different stages of their development, and you're assessing more for athletic performance now, and Dave's probably going more of a long-term view. How would you go assessing young stock, do you think? If someone chucked you at a sales yard and said, have a look at these horses and see what you reckon, what would be your confidence level?
I'd be throwing darts. It's a completely different thing. I'm dealing with the finished or near finished product, and how are you going to go under maximum exertion? How far away from you achieving your peak? I'm not so much looking at that early day development. I think that's a long, there's similarities, but they're a long way apart for me. Yeah. I'd go better than the average person off the street, but I think there's a big difference in what we do there.
And sort of considering that, the value of, you stepping outside, you obviously talk to a lot of guys who do something similar to what you do, to assess, assess form and assess performance and from a short-term perspective. Is there a significant value in you reaching out to other people like Dave and other people within the industry to try to grab that, develop your understanding of aspects like, pedigrees and profiles and physical development of horses? Is there an advantage or an opportunity for guys in your space to do that more?
Massive advantage. I think I've bugged Dave about a few things since we've been chatting. I think one of the first conversations we had, I'd sort of floated an idea that it's a bit of a theory from the yard, was about 2-year-olds on debut that just parade like a lamb. Like they've been there 100 times, and then, put up a huge rating, should be winning their next start based on form, and then they walk into the yard, they're a bit fizzy, and it's a completely different parade to what I'd seen on debut, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. I've got a bit of a theory. It's that they know they're about to be under maximum exertion. The first time they went to the races, it's a different environment. They don't really know what's about to happen in front of them. They're smart animals. The second time they come to the races, they figured it out. They know what's about to happen, and it was sort of the psyche of the horse. So I'd been penalising it too much early days, and I'd sort of stopped discounting it as much as I had. But the first person I spoke to about that idea was Dave. What a benefit for me, because it's not sort of my area. It's more form. The mounting yard is a confirmation tool. So I can get little bits and pieces and little edges I've got on the run and confirmation from guys like Dave. It's a massive advantage.
Dave, I know you've used form guys in the past and still do. How important are they, particularly identifying tried horses? One that springs to mind is Russian Camilla, the sister to Russian Camelot, that might have paid for a few renovations at your house and different things that,
I did.
Being able to mix, you can see the horse, but using those form guys to go, this horse has got above average talent.
Well, it's really important. I mean, it's becoming an increasingly important element in identifying talent, from a trial perspective or a race perspective, because it takes a lot of guesswork out of it. I mean, you've got you've got hard data. And I mean, I think you're silly if you don't use it. It's, you've got the sectional timings from from the gate to this, certain point, and obviously the closing sectionals. I don't think it can be used in isolation, but it would be, for me now, it's certainly a bedrock of establishing talent. I mean, but you've got to use it in the recipe to find, you've got to weigh up, how old it is, who's training it, can it be improved, finding out the inside information about from the yard, what the breeding is, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it's massive. And I mean, there's a lot of well-known syndicators and obviously trainers, use that. And my biggest problem is actually trying to convince potential buyers of my clients to use that information. So, but, I don't assess a tried horse or a trial without it these days. So yeah, it's vital.
Aaron, we'll hook back onto the horse at the moment, King of Roseau. I mean, what are you looking for him next time he steps out? What are you looking at him in terms of, obviously you assess him according to the race he finds himself in and how he measures up to his rivals, but physically, or, when you look at him come in and handle himself, what are you looking for?
Love to see the same parade again. He paraded perfect. He absolutely could knock the horse. I guess what I'd really love is what I'd sort of referenced earlier is I'd just like a little bit more tempo in that next start, because typically tempo doesn't assist turn of foot horses. It's sort of, they've got to chase and it sucks that turn of foot out. I think this horse is slightly different and it travels similar, but I think it's got a little bit more to offer on a more genuinely run race.
And Dave, not just King of Roseau, but you've Pinnock purchased horses have had a good run over the last sort of few months with, Flying Star. There's another syndicator you work closely with, Cam Bennett, and, Dreamzell, recent Metro winner, Call to Glory, just beaten at Flemington. And these are, like King of Roseau, bought for well under sale average. And, you probably got to compromise on certain things to be able to find these horses, but you seem to have a good run at the moment.
Keep talking, Timmy. Keep talking.
The time running out? I think it is.
Yeah, look, it's been good actually. I'll give myself a plug. I've had 19 wins in the last 2 months from June and July. But yeah, look, it's a results based business. Like if horses don't perform well, I take it really personally. But if the horses aren't running well, I usually I'm usually bagging the jockeys or the trainers. I mean, us agents never buy bad horses, right? But yeah, look, it's I take spending other people's money pretty seriously. So as you get older and more experienced, I think you kind of, it's a numbers game. And, I think as you get more experience in this game and get better at the job, and you should be getting better, and look, a lot of horses every year. I mean, you kind of buy less bad horses. And then, I'd like to be able to spend more money with clients, but I love my clients. I mean, most of them turn into really good friends, and it's about the enjoyment. Racing is different things to different people, but mate, more winners the better, mate. Loving it. It's good.
Long may it continue, Dave. Aaron, a bit of a chance for a plug for you. Obviously, currently at the moment, the Straight's running a little bit of a partnership with the Good Oil, and we're promoting you guys through our platform, and we're working on a bit of a partnership at the moment. But talk to us about how people get access. Talk to us about the product, and I guess the value you see in someone becoming a subscriber to your service.
Yeah, so I'm still building the site. So at the moment it's Twitter. So it's at Good Oil Racing. On YouTube, it's the Good Oil, and there's free previews that anyone can watch for the Saturday meet. Brent's going to host this one this week, which is a nice little crossover there. So for the Saturday product, there's 3 products. It depends what you're interested in, but the Saturday product you get, the guys today on a Thursday, they'll get full rate of prices for every runner on Saturday with speed maps, notes on tempo, notes on a few different things. They'll get another set of prices 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. They get the mounting yards, sort of 5 minutes out, stake bets. They get a review sheet. Well, you've actually put a link up, I think, on your site, which has broken down a few different things and shown examples of what the guys can expect. So, and there's stake bets now as well. Guys want me to bring that back, which I think July was the first full month of staking. So for the last 5 weeks, we're going about 33% pot or 35% pot from memory just with the Saturday service. So it's going well.
Yep, that's terrific. Well, thanks, Aaron, for your time. Thanks, Dave, and all the best moving forward for the spring.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure.
Kim, we'll just round off now with a chat about the wagering world. Column this week from Rich Irvine about the lack of consultation for the federal government with punters on the possible change. Just confirmed that the government is consulting the changes. A whole range of people. An article there this morning on the Straight talking about their meeting with, I guess, gambling reform advocates, probably the most polite way to put them. I'd probably describe them as more anti-gambling, but, people like Tim Costello and the Alliance for Gambling Reform meeting with the broadcasters. We don't know if they met with the bookmakers because a lot of the information from Annika Wells's diary was blacked out, but so be it, that's fine. I guess they're trying to build some policy around here. But the one people that haven't been spoken to, and Richie alluded to this in his piece, and it's something that sort of we've been aware of for a while. We talk about consumer protection, Tim. Is there enough protection for punters? Because it feels like punters have been left out in the dark with a lot of this stuff.
Problem for punters is where, who represents them. Richard Irvine's sort of been a long time, I'm not going to say self-appointed, but he's put himself out there and done a lot of work and voluntary work to try and push the case for punters. But I guess from a government point of view or regulators, they would argue that 95+% of punters are very well looked after. Their minimum bet laws don't apply to them, because they're not betting big enough, or they're just, they're recreation, and that's fine. The industry needs plenty of those punters, but who do they go to get to represent the punters? I think that's the issue, and it's very hard. Even as good a job as Richards has done, he's representing a small batch of punters, I would say, professionals and those that are more engaged during the week, like us watching midweek and betting in sort of outside Randwick and Flemington and things like that. So it's just trying to find the right representative, and governments are busy or ministers are busy, and they probably feel they could better spend their time. Unfortunately, it would be great to have a proper representative, but how you do that, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah,
without proper funding from PRAs, probably.
Yeah, that's right. You've got people complaining about minimum bet limits. You've got a framework of different states that have, operating on these things. No clear national ombudsman, so it makes it quite difficult. So I think going forward, there really needs to be a sense of consultation with. We talk about consumer protection. Consulting the consumer is number one here. It's not just about preventing people from gambling that shouldn't be gambling or that have got issues with it. It's about making it a better experience and, to be perfectly honest, a better customer experience for those who bet day to day. Thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by Inglis and Darley. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you listen to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe. Send us an email at editor@thestraight.com.au and let us know what you anything you want us to talk about. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you again next week.